Oh, we can do the name change first. I was trying to segue. We'll go around and have delegates speak to what their groups decided on the name change. We'll go around this way, James. Or else I'll keep you.
We actually voted or did not reach consensus to the name change.
This is stand aside?
No, that we would not want the name change.
Okay. Okay. James?
We didn't consider it. I mean, we did put it in the outreach discussion, but not the committee discussion.
I can't hear you, James.
Yeah.
We didn't consider it.
Outreach?
Outreach, a lot of people just thought this is for the name change, right?
Right.
This, people thought it was too long-winded. We've already dedicated ourselves to nonviolence, mostly along those lines. What would we gain by adopting the name change? As the outreach working group, we consensus to stand aside.
Media blocked for many of the same reasons.
The anti-caucus blocked for many of the same reasons. There were a number of people that additionally felt that the term nonviolent was problematic in that it has not been defined anywhere yet, and so that's an additional concern.
Carolyn?
The GA reached consensus to change the name with community stand aside.
Facilitation didn't have enough support to say, yes, we really like this, but we didn't have any huge concerns where we were going to block it, so we consensus to stand aside.
Lindsay?
I don't, facilitation does not vote.
Okay, that's right.
No, Seniors and Friends do not agree to the name change. There was 6 were in consensus to stay with the name as is and 1 stand aside.
This committee, the Nonviolent Direct Action Training Committee, is where that suggestion originated, and we would consent.
And the Meet Talk Act Nonviolent Affinity Group very much agreed with and consented to this change.
Veterans for Peace didn't consider it.
Okay. There's not support for that based on the feedback, and so we'll move on. Would you like?
I guess I'm first time out as a delegate, but I'm concerned about the groups with sitting delegates who don't consider propositions and what that means for the general sense of consensus and whatever. And is there a process by which they need to go back and consider things, bring an opinion?
That's a fair question and something that we. Go ahead. Robert's going to.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. It's a reality that many proposals will not get considered by certain groups, and after a certain point, if certain groups are consistently not considering proposals, then maybe we need to look at that. But what we had here with this proposal were 3 blocks. Is that correct? At least 2 blocks, and a number of stand-asides. So the reality, like from a facilitation standpoint, it's like, okay, there was one group of 2 people that didn't consider it. So it's kind of like, we're not wanting to force that further. It doesn't make sense from what we're getting back from the group that's something that we need to spend time with.
Yes, and if I may say, that wasn't my intent to force it further.
Yes.
Is to clarify what feels to be a process flaw when groups just don't have time to consider things.
Okay. Well, that's point of process. Well noted. That's not up for discussion. That's not what we're discussing right now. And if you have an idea or proposal, that's something that would be brought to the GA.
Okay, I hear you.
Okay.
Martin, did you have something?
No.
So let's move on to the general agreements proposal, and then basically this is a little complicated because there are general agreements that aren't changed, so we're looking at kind of a line by line situation. And so I don't know if there's a good way for you, if you have a way you want to approach each line, and then we can ask the delegates what they discuss.
Well, with all respect to everyone, this has been a rather difficult process to send to working groups to consider, because it is essentially was a reworking. And the reworking was initiated for clarity and to try and make more concise what we already had. So it would be helpful maybe to see what we have already consents to these. These are consents agreements. So the changes were in three areas. One was the order in which they were presented, which is sort of one way of looking at it. The other was some slight grammatical rewordings, and the other was some additions and deletions. I'm not sure what my role is here. Should I just please help me facilitate?
Because what we're looking at is that each group discussed, the lines that were being changed, and so there was recommendations made, and that's how we could do it. It's more a matter of the order in which we address those lines, and if you could help.
I can help.
Me
yes.
by
Can I make a suggestion actually for a process for this?
Yeah.
So all these groups have considered this, and each group has come up with their individual concerns about the agreement. Rather than going line by line at this point, I think it would be useful just to go around quickly, each group concisely present their consensus or stand aside or whatnot, and their concerns about the proposal, the wording and such, and then it could, potentially, because my understanding from different groups is there are a lot of concerns about change. There isn't consensus. We'll see, but they could be a brief feedback at this point, and then it could be taken for discussion.
And would it be helpful if I would read a line and then have each group?
What I'm proposing is that it actually go to each group give their report on their consensus process,
all right,
and a very brief description of their concerns as related to specific lines in that document. Does that temp check? Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's go this way.
Okay, first, our group, and this goes back to what you were asking about the last proposal, our group actually did not get a chance to discuss this because we did not have all the information available. And it has nothing to do with not thinking it's important. Obviously it is, but the fact is that in meeting places we have time constraints. And so when the other issues are brought up, like the tab or social group coming in and so forth, that generated a lot of discussion as well. So it was not a matter of not wanting to consent or not, but we did not have a chance to read it over, and so our group at least wanted to request an additional week so that we could have that time to go look at it and come back with a well-informed decision.
Correspondence?
We talked about it in outreach, so we're going to pass for now. Thank you.
Outreach, okay. We I put forward a friendly amendment to put no guns instead of weapons of any kind. There was concerns about pocket knives, and I figured we're in western North Carolina, so they might be all over the place. We've reached consensus on the entire document except for the following statements, but that's actually quite a few following statements, so if you want me to read them all, I won't read the whole thing, but the one, carry no guns or weapons at Occupy Asheville, was one we did not reach consensus on. Recognize and confront all forms of government repression, we did not reach consensus on that one. Seek cooperative relationships with police, we did not reach consensus on that one. Let me flip through here. I've got a few more here. Request law enforcement intervention, we did not on that one. Encourage internal debate, we did not on that one as well. Be aware of your own privileges, we did not on that one. Make friends with people who are different, we did not on that one. It sounds like we didn't do anything.
I thought we agreed to a couple.
And those who violate these agreements, we do not on that one as well.
Can I add a point of clarification? There have been several versions have gone around, and our working group perhaps has been, the process with which we presented these has been a little confusing. We had already agreed the enforcement or the accountability clause at the bottom really needs a great deal of work if it's to be.
Claire, can I stop you for a second on this one?
It is a point of process.
It is a point of process.
Okay.
Because what we are actually discussing right now is not what you have revised.
Okay.
What we're discussing right now is what has been sent to the working groups.
All right.
And they're reporting on what they've come back.
Thank you.
And you can get feedback as you have in the other meetings and take that and talk to these groups and try to present it in a way that addresses this feedback.
Okay.
Rather than discussing
we can rather than
outside of
not.
this meeting,
It's
rather
not
than
just
discussing
me.
at this point. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so is that clear to everybody that we're just reporting back on the phase 2 presentation of this proposal because there's been a revision in GA and maybe stuff posted and whatnot. We're just dealing with phase 2 version.
Media did not consent to altering the general agreements, and so as to not be redundant, basically for the concerns that we are rehashing unambiguous agreements that have been previously consented and altering the consensus of the General Assembly that began Occupy Asheville, and it fundamentally alters our relationship with the police, and for those reasons we decided to block.
The Anti-Authoritarian Anti-Capitalist Caucus discussed this proposal. We did not do a line-by-line consensus, partly because it was actually pretty confusing the way the information was presented in the proposal as to like what words were changed, and I think the presentation maybe was challenging. Based on the document overall, though, it was not a document that we could live with, and there were like numerous blocks, near universal blocks within our caucus. And key concerns for our caucus were, first off, I think that this proposal has been, perhaps not intentionally, but has been misrepresented as like a clarification, when in fact it is a wholesale rewrite with sweeping changes to our understanding of what our internal agreements are and our relationship with outside forces like the police. And that was a great concern to us. I think there is a concern specifically, as has already been somewhat voiced, that about the sections related to law enforcement, and a concern that in fact it is internally contradictory to draft a nonviolent statement which endorses cooperation with law enforcement, an institution which is actually premised on the use of coercion and force within society. And we felt like a nonviolent agreement would only be acceptable to us if it specifically addressed those conditions within which we live in, and the reality of a world in which any violence, and of course I think the word violence needs to be better defined, that might come from the 99% sort of pales in comparison to the institutionalized violence of our economic system and law enforcement apparatuses. So for all of these reasons, this was not an agreement that we felt we could live with.
Facilitation?
Carolyn, next turn.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm taking notes too. Okay, the General Assembly reached consensus on most of the small changes. This past week we reached consensus to change recognize and address all forms of government, blah blah blah. Remove through cooperative relationships with police through blah blah blah. To change one to only request law enforcement intervention in matters of public safety as a last resort. Make friends with people who are different than ourselves. Didn't want to consider that. And then
This sounds so bad.
the clause at the end, dealt with separation violate these agreements will be asked to leave. Deal with that as a different matter. There's also, we also said it may be beneficial to include the definition of violence and nonviolence in the general agreements document for those who don't know and for newcomers to the movement.
So, facilitation, so we went line by line, and so I'll go through the lines that we talked about, that we had concerns or didn't reach consensus on. The not denounce Occupy Asheville sentence, we didn't object to the social media part, but the wording of it we weren't super enthusiastic about. The encourage internal debates, we did not reach consensus on the phrasing of that. We didn't reach consensus on the guns and weapons clause. During the restorative justice, we had a friendly amendment that we would like it to be replaced with transformative justice as opposed to restorative justice. And we did not reach consensus on the seek cooperative relationships with police, the friends one, and the ask people to leave the movement one for violating these agreements.
Seniors and friends?
Yeah, seniors and friends.
I'm sorry. I'm being a bad delegate because I forgot one thing. We also were requesting a definition of nonviolence from the group as well.
Okay, seniors and friends ran out of time. We need more time to study the revision. I've mixed something.
Steve?
The Meattalk Act group has not had time to consider this.
The veterans just had 3 minor changes, a couple just rewords that didn't change anything, and the be aware of our own privileges suggested dropping that sentence.
So at this point,
Well, may I speak now?
Sure.
Thank you all for even considering these possibilities. I think the process is what's important here, because if you're asking us to define what nonviolence is, we all have a different understanding of that, as was evident in our armed violence to passive acquiescence. What did we call that thing? Yeah, we did a spectrum at our very successful 25-person attended event on Sunday, where many voices tried to puzzle out what is nonviolence. So the process of going through agreements, I'm not taking this personally. I didn't personally craft all of those agreements. They were a process. And I don't think it needs to be oppositional. I think that what's going on here in this process that we're engaged in is going to help us all understand ways that we might be able to go forward together. And what is going on in Occupy Asheville is a lot of a feeling of divisiveness and factionalism. And we don't even know. If I ask someone what anarchy was, I'm going to get 15 different answers. If I ask someone what black bloc is, or what nonviolence is, or how and if and should we all work together. And I'm sermonizing here because I would love to remain in this exciting movement, but I really would. It's the most diverse and challenging movement I've ever been subjected to. And I think we can only grow with each other, but there's a lot of distrust, and there's a lot of denouncing of one another in public forums that is really hurtful and divisive. And the way I'm feeling energy in this room, I feel it's difficult to come and be part of this. You would lose a lot if I left, and if others like me left who challenge you at some level, just like we lose by not being challenged. So I hope we can find ways to see this as a process that we're working through to come to agreements, and not to try and define our little boxes where we're going to stand and fight each other in. Thank you.
Well put.
Thank you.
And so these are all issues that are really reach the core of important beliefs, and so there's a lot of strong feelings, and so it's important that we kind of step carefully in the sense of offending each other, but also being able to make progress. And so at this point, you know, we'd be looking at a new proposal based with revisions if that's where you wanted to go. So.
Well, I think that members of the group that originated these suggested changes, and in fact was charged with beginning to craft agreements, is quite willing to hear thoroughly anybody's concerns. We would prefer that face to face and in respectful, civil conversations.
Can I ask when your working group meets?
Every Monday at 5.
Okay.
We meet in the back, smoky back room of Havana's Cafe.
Thank you. So Jonathan's not here. He did revise his proposal after being at GA, which would just be going to working groups. It's a phase 2.
I'm going to pass this around to get this information.
We're all sitting here kind of talking in our
Gmail it, Gmail.
Would a way that would
Understand it.
facilitate the process of going through these things to do individual proposals for each one? Because some of these are either rewordings or redundant from the previous general agreements that I feel like a lot of members of the media working group really don't have a problem with, and others. And that would be a way that we could begin to move forward on this without having it be a block change.
Can you explain that more specifically, what you mean by line?
I mean, like, there are, starting with the less contentious ones, because there's really about 2 or 3 of these that everyone's arguing about. Can we revisit the more redundant and minor word changes that were not addressed in the majority of the working group's concerns as a separate matter, and then move on to the more heated ones? Does that make sense?
So it does make sense, but what is your proposal sequencing wise? Are you proposing that?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm not the one bringing the proposal forward personally, but that was a suggestion as a way to move forward.
So I'd like to check just with the group that all the groups that had concerns, and it was actually all but 2 or so. Is it in your interest to talk with NVDA?
No.
Which NVDA. Is just a temp check on these groups. Is it in your interest to between now and the next coordinating council or next GA to discuss the contentious proposals and come up with something?
Wait, discuss the contentious proposals?
The parts of the proposal that are under contention, that there are concerns about, the police and make friends and all that stuff.
Point of time.
Yes.
What the gentleman over there made a good point about, the different, breaking it down into different, like, I'm thinking you mean individual proposals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't think you took a temp check on that, or gave any recognition to it. Am I the only one?
So my intent is to do that. Well, first, before even doing that, I'd like to know if there's energy for doing that between now and next, doing that in the future, and then how to go about doing it.
Okay.
Because if there's not energy to do this, then defining it is sort of pointless. Is what my take is on that. Does that make sense, people? So I didn't see any energy towards that. I didn't see any response whatsoever. So could I get some response on, is there energy to go forward with giving feedback and revising this proposal in the room? Can I get some just twinkles and whatnot from the people?
Tonight?
So I'm not seeing responses from
Clarify.
outside.
Are you talking about tonight or?
I'm talking about outside of this meeting.
Right. Okay. Well, we need clarity.
Moving forward.
that part of the room is always a troublemaker.
Actually, I'd like to get that temp check again. Please, all delegates, go ahead and give up, middle, down twinkles on moving forward with this outside of the meeting. Your energy towards that. Okay. I'm getting somewhere in the middle to up on that. You had a proposal.
My proposal is that we go about this in kind of a unique way, and that is, yesterday, several people in this room participated in this, what I consider really useful, fruitful workshop to discuss issues of violence, nonviolence, diversity tactics, and black bloc. And that it would be good we could do a workshop around something to do with these agreements and the question, like what is nonviolence? And try to come up with a definition of it that would fit into a set of agreements for Occupy Asheville and address some of the other ambiguities in here that people have had trouble with. And see if we can come to some kind of, the discussion itself is useful, and maybe we can come to agreements, maybe we can't, but the discussion itself would maybe help me clarify some of my confusion in some of these issues.
Okay, so I'd like to go first, and there was a proposal from
Yeah, I was going to ask Martin if that would satisfy your interest, or you're more direct.
Honestly, I was suggesting it as a way to move forward because, to be perfectly honest, and this was a topic of discussion at our working group meeting, I find this whole discussion to be redundant. I'd rather move on to the SciTel thing. Let's talk about something that we can do rather than rehashing an old debate. Thank you.
Okay, so let's just do a temp check on Steve's idea of people who want to discuss this in a similar forum that you did a couple days ago. Discuss this issue, particularly the definition of nonviolent is what I heard you say.
And other things where there's significant disagreement.
So I want to get a temp check on that. That's the best next step for this. Can I see a temperature check on that? Everybody please reporting on the temp check. So looks like enough to be like that's kind of where is anybody, let me just go for a consensus on that. Does anybody have any strong concerns about that being the next step? Liberty.
So, okay, I'm kind of speaking for myself, but kind of trying to also speak for other folks in the caucus, which is a little muddled. I think that we're probably not excited about that being a next step, and I have two thoughts on that. One is that my understanding of Martin's original statement was that there was like low-hanging fruit, which would be better, like our energy would be better put into like addressing the things that are non-contentious first. So to start with like the thing that's most contentious sort of, I think, kind of misses that point. And then secondarily, I think many people in our caucus feel that the entire debate around nonviolence is perhaps not that useful in that it's solving a problem that doesn't exist. Like there hasn't actually been a problem of violence like in Occupy Asheville that I'm aware of. And therefore it feels like we're putting a disproportionate amount of time into fixing a problem that doesn't actually exist.
I'd like to speak directly to that.
Because TJ was.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Just to clarify, I don't know when that proposal to directly do it to nonviolence came about. My memory's not that far back. But I think originally one of the concerns was when the tents were up and there was a lot of intense stuff going on with that situation, and that situation is not going on right now, so I don't know if that was the focus of it, or the purpose at that point. I agree that you don't hear about people fighting inside the meetings or whatever, so I don't know if that clarifies what the nonviolence issues were, but there were some instances it was just localized where it took place.
We have a lot of enemies, and we also have lovely people who are lost that are attracted to us because we're compassionate people. And some of them may need direction. So it's been found to be that way in many other occupies. So that piece, and also if we were going to host something or we were going to be going to an event